David Thompson looked at the money reports on his wooden desk in his city office. He was 45 years old and owned Thompson Digital, a computer company that changed how people use online storage. He had about $3 billion to his name. But these days, none of it made him happy. His divorce from Sarah had ended 6 months ago. She took a big chunk of his money and ran off to France with her gym trainer. They never had kids. Sarah didn't want any, and David was too busy making money to care much about it. Now he sat alone in his big office looking out at the city, wondering why he worked so hard for all this. Before we start, write your name and where in the world you are watching from in the comments below. His secretary knocked and walked in. "Mr. Thompson, your car is here for the charity meeting." David waved his hand at her. "Cancel it. Cancel everything this week." She looked surprised. David Thompson never canceled meetings. "Sir, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I just need time away. Tell everyone I won't be around for a few days." After she left, David sat in his quiet office and made up his mind. He was sick of the lies and tired of people acting fake around him because of his money. He wanted to know what normal felt like, to talk to people who didn't know who he was. He went home to his fancy apartment and put on different clothes. He had never worn cheap jeans from a regular store, a basic work shirt, and old boots he bought once for a company photo. He looked at himself in the mirror and almost didn't know the guy looking back. Without his expensive suits and power look, he seemed like any regular middle-aged man. David took his oldest car, a beat-up truck he kept at his house outside the city, and drove to a neighborhood across town. It was a blue-collar area where people worked hard to pay their bills but cared about their community. He parked and walked until he found what he wanted, a small restaurant called Rosie's, with red seats and a worn but clean look. He walked inside and sat in a corner booth. The place smelled like coffee and bacon, and it felt comfortable and lived in. A waitress came over, a woman around 30 with blonde hair in a ponytail. She wore a white shirt with stains on it and looked tired, but her smile was real. "Welcome to Rosie's. What can I get you?" "Just coffee for now," David said. "Thanks." She came back with a hot cup and went to help other customers. David watched her work. Emily moved with practiced efficiency between the tables, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail that had seen better days. David watched her refill coffee cups, clear plates, and chat with customers who clearly knew her by name. She had an easy smile for everyone, but he could see the tiredness in her shoulders, the way she paused for just a second between tables to catch her breath. "That's my mom," a small voice said. David turned to find a little girl with blonde curls and bright blue eyes standing beside his booth. She couldn't have been more than 6, wearing a pink backpack that looked almost as big as she was. "She works really hard," the girl continued, climbing uninvited into the seat across from him. "I'm Lily." "I'm David," he said, surprised by his own smile. When was the last time a child had approached him so fearlessly? "Are you new here? I haven't seen you before, and I come here every day after school." Lily unzipped her backpack and pulled out a worn coloring book and a small box of crayons. "Mom says I can sit with customers if they don't mind and if I'm quiet. But I'm not very good at being quiet." Emily appeared at the table, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Lily, honey, you can't just sit with strangers." "He's not a stranger, Mom. His name is David, and he likes coffee." Lily looked up at her mother with complete confidence in her logic. "I'm sorry," Emily said to David. "She's usually at the babysitter's, but Mrs. Chen had a doctor's appointment today. Lily, come sit at the counter." "It's fine," David found himself saying. "I don't mind the company." Emily hesitated, then looked around the busy diner. "Are you sure? She can talk your ear off." "I like to talk. Lily announced, already coloring what appeared to be a horse with purple legs. "What do you do for work, David?" The question hit him unexpectedly. What could he say? That he owned a company worth billions? That he spent his days in meetings about quarterly reports and market projections? "I work in an office," he said finally. "That sounds boring. I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up. That means I'll help animals when they're sick. Yesterday I found a hurt bird in the alley behind our apartment, and I made it a little house out of a shoebox. Mom said we can't keep it, but I think it just needs someone to take care of it." Emily set down a piece of apple pie. "On the house," she said quietly, "for putting up with my daughter." Over the next hour, David learned more about Lily Carter than he'd learned about any person in months. She told him about her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who let her help feed the class hamster. About her best friend Sarah, who had a pool but never invited Lily over because their apartment was too small for sleepovers. About how she did her homework at the diner every afternoon, because their studio apartment didn't have a good table. "Mom works double shifts on weekends," Lily explained, carefully staying inside the lines of her coloring page. "She says she's saving up for a better place to live, somewhere with 2 bedrooms so I can have my own space for all my animal books." David glanced around the diner. Other customers came and went, but Emily never seemed to stop moving. She served food, cleaned tables, rang up checks, and still managed to check on Lily every few minutes with a gentle touch to her daughter's hair or a quick, "How's the homework going, baby?" "My mom used to be in nursing school," Lily continued, switching to a green crayon for what might have been grass or possibly a tree. "But then I was born, and she had to stop. She says maybe she'll go back someday, but I don't know when because school costs a lot of money." The words hit David like a physical blow. Here was Emily, clearly intelligent and caring, serving coffee and clearing tables instead of helping people heal. Here was Lily, bright and curious, doing homework in a diner booth because their apartment was too small. Meanwhile, he had 3 homes he barely visited and enough money to buy this entire neighborhood. "David, are you okay?" Lily was looking at him with concern that seemed far too mature for her age. "I'm fine," he managed. "Just thinking." "Mom says thinking too hard gives you wrinkles. Look." Lily pointed to Emily, who was counting tips at the register. Even from across the room, David could see the lines of exhaustion around her eyes. "She thinks a lot about money and bills and grown-up stuff." As the afternoon wore on, the diner began to empty. Emily finally got a break and slid into the booth beside her daughter. "How was school today, Bug?" "Good. We learned about fractions and I helped Tommy with his math because he was crying. Mrs. Rodriguez said I was a good helper." Lily showed her mother the coloring page. "David kept me company while you were busy. That was nice of him." Emily looked at David with a mix of gratitude and wariness. "You didn't have to do that." "She's good company," David said. "Smarter than most adults I know." Emily smiled, and for a moment, the tiredness faded from her face. "She is pretty special. Sometimes I think she's the only thing I did right." The vulnerability in her voice caught David off guard. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that raising such a remarkable child while working so hard was an incredible achievement. Instead, he found himself asking, "How long have you been working here?" 3 years. Rosie gave me a chance when nobody else would. Single mom, no references, no experience. Emily glanced around the diner with obvious affection. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most months." "Mom," Lily said, tugging on Emily's sleeve, "can David come back tomorrow? I want to show him my animal book." "Lily, David probably has his own family to go home to." David felt something twist in his chest. his own family. Catherine, who was probably shopping in Paris with her trainer boyfriend. The empty penthouse. The silent dinners. "Actually," he heard himself say, "I'd like that, if it's okay with you." Emily studied his face. "You don't have to pity us." "It's not pity." The honesty in his own voice surprised him. I haven't had this much genuine conversation in years." Lily clapped her hands. "See, Mom? David likes us." As David paid his check and prepared to leave, Lily grabbed his sleeve. "Promise you'll come back? Pinky, promise?" He looked down at her small, upturned face, so full of trust and hope. When was the last time anyone had asked for his promise and actually cared if he kept it? "Pinky, promise," he said, and meant it. Walking to his car, David felt something he couldn't quite name. For the first time in months, maybe years, he was looking forward to tomorrow. Not for a board meeting or a business deal, but for the chance to sit in a worn vinyl booth and listen to a 6-year-old girl talk about her dreams. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his entire adult life accumulating wealth and power, building walls between himself and the rest of the world. But in one afternoon, a waitress and her daughter had made him feel more connected to humanity than his entire fortune ever had. As he drove back toward downtown, David caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, he looked like he had somewhere to be tomorrow. Somewhere that mattered. The next afternoon, James arrived at Rosie's diner earlier than usual. The familiar bell chimed as he pushed through the door. But something felt different. Emily wasn't behind the counter. Instead, Rosie herself was manning the coffee pot, her weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Where's Emily?" James asked, sliding into his usual booth. Rosie's face creased with worry. "Had to take Lily to urgent care this morning. Poor little thing woke up burning with fever." She poured his coffee without asking. "Emily's been pacing that waiting room for 3 hours now." James's stomach tightened. "Is it serious?" "Don't know yet. But Emily—" Rosie shook her head. "She's beside herself. You know how it is when you can't afford to get sick." The weight of those words settled over James like a cold blanket. He'd never thought about the cost of getting sick. When he had a headache, he called his private physician. When he needed a checkup, he walked into the finest medical facilities money could buy. The idea that someone might have to choose between medical care and paying rent was foreign to his world. "Which urgent care?" he asked. "Community health on 5th Street. But I wouldn't." Rosie started, then stopped herself. Actually, Emily could probably use a friendly face right about now. James left a 20 on the table for a cup of coffee he hadn't touched, and drove across town to the clinic. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the faces of people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. He found Emily hunched in a plastic chair, holding a sleeping Lily against her chest. The little girl's cheeks were flushed red, her breathing shallow and rapid. Emily's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion and something that looked like panic. "David!" Emily looked up, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Rosie told me." "How is she?" Emily's voice cracked. "They want to run tests, blood work, maybe a chest x-ray, but—" She glanced around the crowded waiting room and lowered her voice. "It's going to be at least $200. I don't get paid until Friday, and I already used my emergency fund when the washing machine broke last month." James watched Lily's small chest rise and fall. The child who had been so animated yesterday, chattering about becoming a veterinarian, now lay limp and feverish in her mother's arms. "What did they say it might be?" he asked. "Could be just a virus, Or maybe strep throat. But with her fever this high. Emily's voice broke. I can't lose her, David. She's everything I have. You won't lose her, James said firmly. Let me help. Emily shook her head immediately. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. James reached into his wallet and pulled out $400 bills. Take it. Emily stared at the money like it might bite her. David, that's too much. I can't. Yes, you can. He pressed the bills into her free hand. Get her the care she needs. Take tomorrow off if you have to. This is what friends do for each other. Friends don't give friends $400, Emily whispered, but her fingers closed around the money. Good friends do, James said, and you'd do the same for me if our situations were reversed. They both knew that wasn't true. Emily lived paycheck to paycheck, stretching every dollar until it screamed. The idea that she could casually hand someone $400 was laughable. But James said it anyway, trying to preserve her dignity in a moment when the world was determined to strip it away. I'll pay you back, Emily said, tears forming in her eyes. Every cent, I promise. Only if you want to. But there's no rush. A nurse called Lily's name, and Emily stood carefully, cradling her daughter. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to thank you. Just get her better, James said. He watched them disappear down a hallway, Emily's worn sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. For a moment, he sat alone in the waiting room, surrounded by the quiet desperation of people who couldn't afford to be sick. This was $400. To James, it was less than he spent on a single bottle of wine at dinner, less than his housekeeper made in a day. It was nothing. But to Emily, it was the difference between watching her daughter suffer and getting her the help she needed. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had $3 billion sitting in various accounts, earning interest he never bothered to check. $3 billion that he couldn't spend in 10 lifetimes, even if he tried. And here was a woman he genuinely cared about, faced with the impossible choice between her child's health and keeping a roof over their heads. The math was obscene. While he worried about which yacht to buy next summer, Emily counted quarters for the laundromat. While he had 5 cars he never drove, she took the bus to work. While he threw away more food in a week than she probably bought in a month, she was rationing her daughter's medicine to make it last until payday. James had always known wealth inequality existed, in the abstract way that rich people know about poverty. It was a statistic in a newspaper, a talking point at charity galas. But sitting in that urgent care waiting room, surrounded by people who looked tired in their bones, it became real. 2 hours later, Emily emerged with Lily in her arms. The little girl was awake now, though still pale and glassy-eyed. Strep throat, Emily said, relief evident in her voice. Antibiotics and rest. She'll be fine. Thank God, James said, standing up. How are you holding up? Emily managed a weak smile. Better now. The doctor said she should be back to normal in a few days. She hefted a white paper bag. Antibiotics and fever reducer. And they gave me instructions for taking care of her at home. You should take the rest of the week off, James said, as they walked toward the exit. I can't afford to take the rest of the week off, Emily replied, but I'll see how she's doing tomorrow. They stood in the parking lot, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows between the cars. Lily had fallen asleep again, her small hands clutching her mother's shirt. Emily, James said carefully, you don't have to struggle this hard. There are programs, assistance. I've looked into everything, Emily cut him off, but not unkindly. I make just enough to disqualify for most help, but not enough to actually get by comfortably. It's like being stuck in quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. James wanted to tell her she didn't have to struggle at all. He wanted to write her a check that would solve every financial problem she'd ever have. He wanted to set up college funds and trust accounts and make sure she never had to choose between medicine and groceries again. But he couldn't. Not without revealing who he really was. And somehow, that felt like a betrayal bigger than any lie he'd ever told. "David?" Emily was looking at him strangely. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just thinking," he said, "about how unfair life can be sometimes." "Life isn't fair," Emily said, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd learned that lesson early and hard. "But it's still beautiful. Look at her." She gazed down at Lily's sleeping face. 3 hours ago, I was terrified I might lose her. Now she's going to be fine. That's a miracle, even if it cost $200 I didn't have." James looked at Lily's peaceful face and felt something shift inside his chest. This child, who had chatted with him about veterinary school and drawn pictures of horses, had been suffering while he sat in his climate-controlled office, worrying about stock prices and merger deals. How many Emilys were out there? How many children went without medicine because their parents couldn't afford it? How many families chose between heating and eating, between rent and health care? "I should get her home," Emily said. "Thank you again, David. I mean it. You saved us today." As James watched them drive away in Emily's dented Honda, he realized something that made his stomach turn. He hadn't saved them. He'd helped them navigate a crisis that shouldn't exist in the first place. In a just world, a child's fever wouldn't be a financial catastrophe. In a just world, a hard-working single mother wouldn't have to choose between her daughter's health and paying rent. And he was part of the problem. While he hoarded billions, people like Emily struggled to afford basic necessities. While he bought companies for sport, families went bankrupt over medical bills. The guilt settled over him like a heavy coat. He'd been playing at being normal, enjoying the warmth of authentic human connection while hiding the very wealth that created the inequality Emily faced every day. He was a fraud, and worse, he was a fraud who was falling in love with people whose struggles his very existence perpetuated. James sat in his luxury car in the parking lot of a community health clinic, surrounded by the evidence of systemic inequality, and realized that helping Emily with $400 hadn't made him a good person. It had made him complicit. He was putting a Band-Aid on a wound that his own existence had helped create. The worst part was that he didn't know how to fix it. He could give Emily money, but that would require explaining who he really was. And once she knew the truth, would she still look at him with the same warmth? Would Lily still climb into his lap and tell him about her day? Or would they see him for what he really was? A symbol of everything wrong with a system that let children suffer while billionaires played at being normal? The weeks that followed blurred together in a rhythm James had never known existed. Every afternoon at 3:30, he'd push through the glass door of Rosie's diner, hearing the familiar chime announce his arrival. The red vinyl booth in the corner had become his unofficial office, though no billion-dollar deals were discussed there. Instead, he helped a 6-year-old with multiplication tables and listened to dreams that cost more than most people's annual salaries. 7 times 8 is 56, Lily announced proudly, her pencil hovering over a worksheet decorated with cartoon animals. "That's right," James said, watching her blonde hair fall across her forehead as she bent over the paper. "You're getting good at this." "Mama says I'm smart like she was in school." Lily looked up, her blue eyes bright with the confidence only children possess. "She was going to be a nurse, but then I happened, and everything changed." James felt something twist in his chest. He'd learned to recognize these moments when the weight of their reality pressed against his carefully constructed facade. Your mom is still smart. Sometimes life just takes different turns than we planned. From across the diner, Emily appeared with the coffee pot, moving between tables with practiced efficiency. She wore the same pale blue uniform every day, the fabric soft from countless washes. Her smile never wavered, even when dealing with difficult customers or covering shifts for co-workers who called in sick. "How's the homework going over here?" she asked, pausing beside their booth. "All done." Lily held up her worksheet with satisfaction. James helped with the hard ones. Emily's expression flickered, something James had begun to notice more often. A tightness around her eyes when Lily spoke about him with such easy affection. "That's nice of him," she said carefully. "But remember, James has his own life. He can't always be here to help." The words stung more than they should have. James watched Emily move away, her ponytail swaying as she refilled coffee cups at the next table. She was protecting Lily from disappointment, and he couldn't blame her. How could he explain that this diner booth had become more important to him than his corner office overlooking the city? "Can I draw you a picture?" Lily asked, already reaching for the crayons Emily kept in a coffee mug for her. "Of course." James watched her work, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. She started with 3 stick figures standing in front of a building that looked suspiciously like the diner. The smallest figure had yellow scribbles for hair and wore a blue dress. The middle figure was taller with brown hair, and the largest had dark hair and wore what appeared to be jeans. "Who are they?" he asked, though something in his stomach already knew. "That's me, and Mama, and you." Lily's crayon moved across the paper, adding details with the serious focus of a child creating art. "We're a family." The word hit him like a physical blow. Family. James stared at the drawing, at the way Lily had positioned them close together, the way she'd drawn little hearts floating above their heads. This 6-year-old had created the life he'd been unconsciously dreaming about for weeks. "Lily," he started, his voice rougher than intended. "You're like a dad," she continued, oblivious to his internal chaos. "You help me with homework, and you buy me chocolate milk, and you listen when I talk about school. Mama works really hard, but she's tired sometimes. You're not tired of me." James couldn't speak. Across the diner, Emily was watching them, and he could see the moment she noticed the drawing. Her face went pale, and she quickly turned away, but not before he caught the fear in her eyes. That evening, after Lily had been picked up by the teenager who watched her until Emily's shift ended, James lingered in the booth. Emily worked around him, wiping tables and refilling salt shakers, her movements sharp with tension. "She drew us as a family," he said finally. Emily's hand stilled on the table she was cleaning. "Kids have big imaginations." "Emily, we need to talk about this." "About what?" She faced him then, her defenses clearly up. "About how my 6-year-old is getting attached to someone who'll disappear from her life without warning. About how she's starting to see you as a father figure when you're just... What exactly are you, James? You show up here every day, you help with homework, you pay for things we can't afford. But I don't know anything real about you." The questions hung between them like accusations. James realized he'd been so focused on the warmth of belonging that he'd ignored the foundation of lies supporting it all. Emily deserved answers he couldn't give without destroying everything. "I care about both of you," he said. "That's real." "Caring isn't enough." Emily sat across from him, her voice low but intense. "Lily asked me yesterday if you were going to be her new daddy. How do I answer that? How do I explain that grown-ups sometimes leave, that people who seem permanent can just vanish? She's been hurt enough." The pain in Emily's voice made James's chest ache. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he would never hurt Lily, that they'd become the most important people in his world. But how could he make those promises while living a lie? "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Everyone says that." Emily's laugh was bitter. "Lily's father said that too, right up until he found out I was pregnant. Then, suddenly, he had other priorities." James reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Her fingers were rough from work, her nails short and practical. "I'm not him." "How do I know that? You won't even tell me what you do for work. You show up with money when we need it most, but you never talk about your own life. It's like you don't exist outside this diner." The irony wasn't lost on him. In many ways, he didn't exist outside this diner. The man who sat in boardrooms and made decisions affecting thousands of employees felt like a stranger. This version of himself, the one who helped with homework and listened to a little girl's dreams, felt more real than anything in his penthouse. "Some things are complicated," he said lamely. "Everything's complicated when you have a child." Emily pulled her hand away. "But I've been honest with you about our situation, about our struggles. You know how much we make, where we live, what we dream about. You know Lily wants to be a veterinarian, and that I want to go back to school. You know I cry sometimes when the bills come, because I'm scared I can't provide enough for her. What do I know about you?" James felt the weight of his deception crushing down on him. He knew the color of Emily's scrubs from her last nursing job, knew she kept Lily's drawings taped to their refrigerator, knew she fell asleep reading because she was too exhausted to turn off the light. Emily knew none of his truths. "I want to tell you," he said, "but I'm afraid you'll see me differently." "I'm afraid you'll disappear." Emily stood up, smoothing her apron. "And I'm more afraid that Lily will be devastated when you do." That night, James sat in his penthouse, staring at the city lights below. Lily's drawing was spread on his coffee table, those 3 stick figures representing everything he'd never known he wanted. The little hearts she'd drawn seemed to mock him with their innocence. The next few days passed in a strange tension. James continued his routine, arriving each afternoon to find Lily waiting with homework and stories. But Emily watched their interactions with visible worry, her smiles forced and her conversations brief. "James," Lily said one afternoon, looking up from a book about animals, "are you rich?" The question came out of nowhere, hitting him like a punch. "Why do you ask?" "Sarah at school says her dad knows lots about money and cars and stuff. Her dad drives a really nice car and buys her whatever she wants. You're always buying me things too, and you don't seem worried about money like Mama is." James felt Emily's eyes on him from behind the counter. "Money isn't the most important thing," he said carefully. "But you have it, right? More than us?" The simple directness of childhood cut through all his careful deflections. "Yes," he admitted. "I have more money than your mom." "How much more?" Emily appeared at their table as if summoned by the dangerous direction of the conversation. "Lily, that's not polite to ask. But I want to know. If James has lots of money, maybe he could help you go back to school. Maybe we could move to a bigger place, and maybe—" "Lily, stop." Emily's voice was sharp, sharper than James had ever heard her use with her daughter. "Money doesn't solve everything, and it's not okay to ask people for things." Lily's face crumpled at the rebuke. "I just thought—" "Well, don't think about that." Emily softened immediately, sitting beside her daughter. "We're fine on our own. We've always been fine on our own." The message was clear, and it was directed at James as much as Lily. They didn't need his charity. They didn't need his wealth. But watching Emily struggle to maintain their dignity, while knowing he could solve their problems with what amounted to pocket change for him, was torture. Later that evening, Emily approached his booth with an envelope. "I need to give you this." Inside were $20 bills, worn and carefully counted. "What's this?" "The money you gave me for Lily's doctor visit. I've been saving it back." "Emily, no." James pushed the envelope toward her. "That was a gift. I don't take charity." Her voice was quiet but firm. "We pay our own way." "It wasn't charity. It was because I care about Lily. About both of you." "That makes it worse." Emily sat down heavily. "Don't you see? Lily is already pretending you're her father. If you keep acting like one, buying things, solving our problems, what happens when you get tired of playing house? What happens to her when you remember you have a real life somewhere else?" James felt something break open in his chest. "This is my real life." "Is it?" "Because in my real life, I work 2 jobs to pay for a studio apartment above a laundromat. In my real life, I choose between groceries and gas money. In my real life, I dream about going back to school, but know it's impossible because I can't afford childcare. What's your real life like, James? Because I'm starting to think we're living in completely different worlds." The truth sat between them like a bomb waiting to explode. James could feel the moment approaching when he'd have to choose between honesty and safety, between the risk of losing everything and the certainty of living a lie forever. "Keep the money," he said quietly, "for Lily's college fund." Emily stared at him for a long moment. "You really don't understand, do you? It's not about the money. It's about what the money represents. It's about the fact that you can solve our biggest problems without thinking twice, while I lie awake at night trying to figure out how to make ends meet. What kind of foundation is that for whatever this is between us?" She was right, and James knew it. The money wasn't a bridge between their worlds. It was evidence of the chasm separating them. Every dollar he spent, every problem he solved, only highlighted the fundamental inequality that made their relationship impossible. But as he watched Emily walk away, her shoulders straight with pride and pain, James realized he'd reached the point of no return. He could continue living this lie, watching the woman he loved struggle while he pretended to be someone he wasn't. Or he could tell the truth and risk losing the only real happiness he'd ever known. The choice was no choice at all. "Emily, wait!" The words came out rougher than he intended, carrying the weight of 3 months of deception. She stopped, but didn't turn around. Her hand rested on the diner's glass door, knuckles white against the metal handle. Through the window, James could see Lily coloring at their usual booth, completely unaware that her world was about to shatter. "There's something I need to tell you." Emily's laugh held no humor. "Let me guess. You're moving away? Found someone more your speed? Or maybe you've decided slumming it with the poor folks has lost its charm?" The words hit like physical blows. James stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "My name isn't James Williams." Something in his tone made her turn. Her green eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her jaw was set with determination. "What are you talking about?" "It's James Mitchell." He watched her face, waiting for recognition. It came slowly, like dawn breaking over her features. First confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like horror. "No." The word was barely a whisper. "Emily, I can explain." "James Mitchell." She said his name like it tasted bitter. "The billionaire. The one who just bought the old Morrison building downtown. The one whose divorce was all over the papers last year." He nodded, his throat tight. Yes. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Emily stared at him as if seeing a stranger, which he supposed she was. Her eyes traveled from his worn jeans to his day-old stubble to his calloused hands, hands that had gotten rough from helping Rosie fix the diner's broken booth last month. "You've been lying to me." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the tremor underneath. "For 3 months. Every day. Every conversation. Every time you sat in that booth and let me serve you coffee like you were just another customer struggling to make ends meet. It wasn't like that, wasn't it?" The dam burst. "Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel right now? How stupid. I told you things, James. Personal things. About Lily's father leaving when he found out I was pregnant. About dropping out of nursing school, about counting change to buy groceries." Her voice cracked. "And you sat there knowing you could solve every problem I have with pocket change." James reached for her, but she stepped back, bumping against the door. "Emily, please, let me explain why—" "Why what? Why you decided to play house with the poor people. Why you thought it would be fun to see how the other half lives." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her voice grew stronger, not weaker. "Was it entertaining? Watching me worry about Lily's doctor bill while you're worth $3 billion? The number hung in the air between them. $3 billion. More money than Emily would see in 1,000 lifetimes. More than everyone in this neighborhood would see combined. "I wasn't playing," James said quietly. "Everything I felt, everything we had, it was real." Emily wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. "How can it be real when it's built on a lie? When you know everything about my life and I know nothing about yours? When you've been studying me like some sort of experiment? That's not what this was." "Then what was it?" She crossed her arms over her chest, protecting herself. "What does a billionaire want with a waitress and her kid? What could we possibly give you that you can't buy?" The question hit the mark so perfectly that James actually stepped backward. Because that was exactly what had drawn him here. What he couldn't buy. The warmth in Emily's smile when he asked about her day. Lily's complete acceptance of him. Her trust, given so freely, it had nearly broken his heart. The way Rosie treated him like family after just 2 weeks, saving him the last piece of apple pie. "You gave me a reason to get up in the morning," he said. "You gave me a family." Emily's face crumpled for a moment before she caught herself. "We're not your family, James. We can't be. Look at us." She gestured to herself, then to the diner behind her. "Look at where we come from. You live in a world I can't even imagine. Private jets, $1,000 meals, charity galas. What happens when you get bored of playing normal? When the novelty wears off? It won't. How can you know that?" Her voice broke. "How can you promise me something you've never experienced before? You've never had to choose between paying rent or buying groceries. You've never had to explain to your child why you can't afford the school trip or the birthday party. This isn't a game you can quit when it stops being fun." James felt the ground shifting beneath him. Everything she said was true. He had no experience with the kind of life she lived, no understanding of the daily choices and sacrifices that shaped her world. "You're right," he said. "I don't know what it's like to struggle the way you have, but I know what it's like to have everything and still feel empty. I know what it's like to be surrounded by people who only care about what you can do for them. And now you're surrounded by people who care about you because they don't know who you are," Emily shot back. "How is that better? How is that honest?" The words stung because they carried truth. But James pressed on, desperate to make her understand. "It started that way. I came here because I was curious, because I wanted to see how normal people lived. But it became something else. You became something else. Emily shook her head. I can't do this. I can't stand here and pretend this is fixable. You lied to me, James. You lied to Lily. She draws pictures of you. Did you know that? Pictures of the three of us together. She calls you her almost daddy when she thinks I'm not listening. The words were like a knife between his ribs. James thought of Lily's gap-toothed smile, the way she saved him half her cookies, how she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder just last week while he read to her. I love her, he said. I love both of you. No, Emily's voice was firm. You love the idea of us. You love how we make you feel. But you don't love us enough to be honest. You don't love us enough to trust us with the truth. I was scared, James admitted. I was scared you'd react exactly like this, that you'd think I was using you or that everything between us was fake. And instead, you decided to lie to us for 3 months. Emily's laugh was bitter. How is that better? How is that more respectful? James had no answer. Every argument he made, every explanation he offered, only seemed to make things worse. The gulf between them wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about fundamental honesty, about the choices he'd made and their consequences. What do you want from me? Emily asked suddenly. Really? What do you want? Because if this is about guilt, if you feel sorry for the poor single mom and want to help, just write us a check and leave. I'll take your money if it means Lily gets a better life. But don't pretend this is about love. It is about love. The words came out desperate, raw. Emily, you changed my life. Both of you. Before I met you, I was barely living. Going through the motions, making money just to make more money. I haven't felt alive in years. And then I walked into this diner and everything shifted. Because we were shiny and new, Emily said. Because we were different from your usual world. But what happens when the shine wears off? When I have morning breath and Lily throws tantrums, and we're just ordinary people with ordinary problems? I want the ordinary problems, James said fiercely. I want to worry about homework and scraped knees, and whether we remembered to pay the electric bill. I want Sunday morning cartoons and grocery shopping and arguing about whose turn it is to do dishes. Emily studied his face, searching for something. You think you do, but you've never actually lived that life. You've been visiting it, like a tourist. When the vacation's over, you go back to your real world. This is my real world now. Is it? Emily's voice was quiet, but cutting. Then prove it. Give it up. Give up the money, the company, the penthouse. Come live in our apartment above the laundromat. Work 2 jobs to pay rent. Choose between groceries and utilities. If this is really your world now, if we're really your family, then live like we do. The challenge hung between them, and James felt the weight of it. Could he do it? Could he actually walk away from everything he'd built, everything that defined him? The thought terrified him, but not as much as the thought of losing Emily and Lily. I would, he said, if that's what it takes. No, you wouldn't. Emily's voice was sad now, tired. And I wouldn't ask you to, because that's not love either. Love isn't about one person sacrificing everything for the other. It's about building something together, honestly, openly. And we can't do that when our starting points are so different, we might as well be different species. She turned toward the door again, and James felt panic rise in his chest. Emily, don't walk away. Please, we can figure this out. How? She faced him one last time. How do we figure this out, James? How do I trust you again? How do I explain to Lily that the man she's gotten attached to has been pretending to be someone else? How do I know that anything you've said or done has been real? The questions hit like hammer blows, each one driving home the magnitude of what his deception had cost. James opened his mouth to answer, but Emily held up her hand. "I need time," she said. "I need to think. I need to figure out how to protect my daughter from this mess." She paused, her hand on the door handle. "Stay away from us for a while. Please, don't come to the diner. Don't try to see Lily. Just let us process this." With that, she pulled open the door and walked inside, leaving James standing alone on the sidewalk. Through the window, he watched her scoop Lily into her arms, pressing her face into her daughter's hair, as if drawing strength from the contact. Lily looked around, confused, searching for James. When she spotted him through the glass, she waved enthusiastically, her smile bright and trusting. James raised his hand in response, his heart breaking as he realized this might be the last time she looked at him with such pure affection. He turned and walked to his car, not the beat-up Honda he'd been driving, but his actual car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people in this neighborhood made in 5 years. As he drove away from the diner, away from the only place he'd ever felt at home, James understood that the hardest part wasn't losing Emily. It was knowing that he'd done this to himself, that his lies, born from fear and selfishness, had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to him. And now he had to live with the consequences of choosing deception over trust, protection over honesty. The question that haunted him as he drove through the familiar streets was whether love could truly bridge the gulf between their worlds, or whether some distances were simply too vast to cross. 3 days passed before James saw Emily again. She hadn't come to work at the diner, and Rosie had quietly explained that she needed time to think. When Emily finally walked through the diner doors on Thursday morning, her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. James sat in his usual booth, the one where Lily had drawn pictures and where he'd first felt like he belonged somewhere. Emily approached his table with careful steps, her server's apron tied tight around her waist like armor. She slid into the seat across from him without invitation, her hands folded on the worn formica surface. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady but quiet, "about what you told me, about all of it." James waited, afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment. Outside, the morning rush was building, but the diner felt suspended in time. "Lily keeps asking where you've been," Emily continued. "She made you a picture yesterday. A get-well card because she thinks you're sick." Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't know what to tell her. "What did you say?" "That sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out." Emily's fingers traced invisible patterns on the table. "The truth is, I don't know what to think anymore. 3 months ago, you were just some guy who liked coffee and listened to my daughter's stories. Now I find out you're James Mitchell. The James Mitchell. The one who's on magazine covers and owns half the buildings downtown." James leaned forward, desperate to bridge the distance between them. "I'm still the same person who sat here every day, who helped Lily with her math homework, who listened when you talked about going back to school." "Are you?" Emily's eyes met his directly for the first time since she'd sat down. "Because the James I knew worried about gas money and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. The real James Mitchell probably spends more on lunch than I make in a month." The accusation hit hard because it was true. "You're right," he said simply. "The real James Mitchell did those things. But that James was miserable. He had everything and nothing at the same time. He was empty." Emily's expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. What happened to your wife? Your real life? Catherine left me 2 years ago for her personal trainer. She said I was emotionally unavailable, that I cared more about my company than anything else. She was right. James ran his hands through his hair. After the divorce, I realized I didn't have a single real relationship in my life. Everything was business deals and social obligations. I was dying inside that glass tower. So you decided to play dress-up and pretend to be poor? The bitterness in Emily's voice cut deep. I didn't plan any of this. James's voice grew urgent. I just drove around one night, ended up here. I was going to have coffee and leave. But then you smiled at me. Really smiled. Not because you wanted something from me or because I could do something for you. Just because you're kind. I hadn't experienced that in years. Emily was quiet for a long moment, watching the steam rise from her untouched coffee cup. Do you know what scared me the most when you told me who you really are? That I'd lied to you. No, she shook her head. That I'd let myself believe someone like you could actually care about someone like me. That for 3 months, I lived in a fantasy where a good man wanted to be part of our little life. The lie wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing how foolish I'd been. The words hit James like physical blows. Emily, that wasn't a fantasy. Everything I felt, everything I feel, that's real. You and Lily are the most real things in my life. But your life isn't real, Emily said, her voice breaking. This is all just a break from your actual existence. Eventually, you'll get bored playing house with the poor people and go back to your penthouse and your board meetings and your world. And where will that leave Lily? Where will it leave me? James reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. What if I told you I don't want to go back to that world? I'd say that's easy to claim when you've only been slumming for 3 months. Emily pulled her hands back. You have no idea what it's really like to worry about rent or choose between groceries and gas money. You've been playing poor, James. I've been living it my whole life. The truth of her words settled between them like a wall. James had never truly worried about money, never felt the crushing weight of paycheck-to-paycheck existence. His poverty had been a costume he could remove whenever he wanted. You're right, he admitted. I don't know what it's like to really struggle. But I know what it's like to be alone. To have everything money can buy and still feel like there's nothing worth having. You and Lily taught me what matters. You saved me from a life that was killing me slowly. And what happens when the novelty wears off? Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. When you realize that real life with us means double shifts and sick days and homework battles and worrying about Lily's college fund? When you remember that your ex-wife lives in Paris and you could have any woman you want? Catherine lives in a beautiful apartment, surrounded by beautiful things, dating beautiful people. And she's miserable too. I know because she calls sometimes, usually drunk, talking about how empty everything feels. James leaned back in the booth. Money doesn't fix loneliness, Emily. It just makes it more comfortable. Emily studied his face for a long moment. Lily asked me something yesterday that I couldn't answer. What did she ask? She wanted to know if you were her dad now. Not her real dad, but her dad. Tears gathered in Emily's eyes. She's never had a father figure, James. She's attached to you in a way that terrifies me because I know how much it would destroy her if you disappeared. The weight of Lily's trust settled on James's shoulders like a sacred responsibility. I don't want to disappear. Wanting and doing are different things. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Your world is going to pull you back eventually. Business crises, social obligations, people who actually belong in your life. How long before this all feels like a mistake? James was quiet for a moment, watching Emily's face. The morning light through the diner windows caught the exhaustion in her features, the strength that had carried her through years of struggling alone. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or status, beautiful in the way that mattered. "What if I could prove to you that I mean what I say?" he asked finally. "How?" "Give me time. Not 3 months of pretending to be someone else, but real time to show you that I choose this life with you and Lily over everything else I have." Emily shook her head. "I can't risk Lily getting more attached just to watch her heart break when you realize this isn't enough for you." "Then don't make it about Lily yet," James said. "Make it about us. Let me prove to you that I'm not going anywhere." "And how exactly would you do that?" "However you want me to. Whatever it takes." Emily was quiet for so long that James wondered if she'd decided to end the conversation. Finally, she spoke. "If you're serious about this, about wanting our life instead of yours, then prove it. But you don't get to just throw money at our problems and call it love. You don't get to buy your way into our hearts. What do you want me to do? Live like us. Really live like us. Get a job that pays what normal people make. Find an apartment you can afford on a regular salary. Show up every day. Not because it's exciting or different, but because it's your real life." The challenge hung between them like a bridge he could either cross or burn. James thought about his penthouse, his company, the life he'd built that felt so meaningless now. Then he thought about Lily's laugh, about Emily's quiet strength, about the way it felt to be needed for who he was rather than what he owned. "Okay," he said simply. Emily's eyes widened slightly. "Okay? I'll do it. Whatever it takes to prove that I choose you and Lily over everything else." For the first time since she'd sat down, Emily's expression softened with something that might have been hope. "This isn't a game, James. If you start this and then change your mind, you'll destroy us, especially Lily." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because there's no going back once she trusts you completely. There's no deciding this is too hard or too boring or too ordinary. If you become her dad in her heart, you have to stay her dad forever." James felt the weight of that promise settle into his bones. It was terrifying and wonderful and more important than any business deal he'd ever made. "I want to be her dad. I want to be your family. I know I've given you no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to let me earn that trust." Emily sat back in the booth, studying his face as if trying to see into his soul. Around them, the diner hummed with normal life. Rosie refilling coffee cups, regulars reading newspapers, the eternal rhythm of working people starting their days. "If we do this," Emily said finally, "we do it right. No shortcuts, no safety nets. You live like we live. You work for what you earn. You prove every single day that you're choosing us over the easy way out. I understand. And if at any point I think you're putting Lily at risk by giving her hope you can't deliver on, I'll ask you to leave, and you'll go. No arguments, no explanations to her about why adults sometimes make mistakes. You'll just go." The terms were harsh, but fair. James nodded. "I understand." Emily finished her coffee in one long swallow, as if the conversation had drained her completely. "I need to think about this more, about what it would mean, and how to protect Lily while giving you a chance to prove yourself. Take all the time you need." She stood to leave, then paused. "James?" "Yes?" "The man I fell for. The one who sat in this booth and made my daughter laugh and listen to my dreams. That man better be real. Because if this is all just an elaborate way to feel better about yourself, I'll never forgive you." With that, she walked away, leaving James alone in the booth with the echo of her words and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, love could bridge any distance if both people were brave enough to build the bridge together. 4 years later, the afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window of their modest two-story home on Maple Street, casting warm shadows across the countertop where Emily organized her nursing supplies. The house wasn't grand by any measure. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, and a kitchen that barely fit their breakfast table. But it was theirs. James stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, while Lily sat at the counter doing homework. Her blonde hair had darkened slightly over the years, but her blue eyes still sparkled with the same curiosity that had first drawn him in at the diner. "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" Lily asked, not looking up from her workbook. The word still sent a jolt through James's chest. Dad. She'd started calling him that about 6 months after the wedding, as naturally as if she'd always known him. The adoption papers had made it official, but Lily had made it real long before any judge signed the documents. "Sure, sweetheart. What's the problem?" Emily walked over, tying her hair back in preparation for her evening shift at St. Mary's Hospital. The nursing program had been tough. 2 years of classes, clinical rotations, and studying late into the night. But she'd graduated with honors. James had attended the ceremony, cheering louder than anyone when her name was called. "If you add too much flour to the pancakes, they'll be dense," she said, kissing James on the cheek and stealing a piece of bacon from the plate. "I'll have you know these are perfect pancakes," James replied, pretending to be offended. "Dad's pancakes are always perfect," Lily chimed in, finally looking up from her homework, with a grin that reminded James exactly why he'd fallen in love with this family. Emily grabbed her purse and badge, but paused at the kitchen doorway. "Don't let her stay up too late. She has that field trip to the zoo tomorrow." "Say field. I want to be a veterinarian," Lily announced, for what must have been the 100th time that month. "Mrs. Peterson says I'm really good with animals." "Then you'll be the best veterinarian in the city," James said, sliding a perfect golden pancake onto her plate. After Emily left for work, the house settled into its evening rhythm. James helped Lily finish her homework at the kitchen table, the same way Emily used to help her at the diner all those years ago. They read together on the couch afterward, Lily curled against his side with a book about marine biology. "Dad?" Lily said during a quiet moment between chapters. "Yeah? What made you come to Rosie's that first day? I mean, you were rich and could eat anywhere. Why did you pick our diner?" James set the book down and looked at this 10-year-old girl who'd changed everything. She was older now, more thoughtful, but still possessed that directness that had disarmed him from the beginning. "I was lonely," he said simply. "I had everything I thought I wanted, but I was the loneliest person in the world." "But you had a big house and fancy cars." "I did, but I didn't have anyone to share pancakes with on Sunday morning. I didn't have anyone to read bedtime stories to. I didn't have anyone who cared if I came home at night." Lily considered this with the seriousness that only children could bring to big questions. "Mom says you saved us, but I think we saved you too." "You definitely saved me," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and your mom showed me what it meant to be part of a family." "I'm glad you were lonely that day," Lily said matter-of-factly, then opened her book again. When Emily came home near midnight, she found them both asleep on the couch, the book fallen open across James's chest and Lily tucked securely under his arm. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them, remembering the scared billionaire who'd sat in their booth 4 years ago, unsure of everything except his need for something real. She gently shook James awake. "Come on, let's get her to bed." Together, they carried Lily upstairs, James lifting her easily while Emily turned down the covers. They tucked her in, and Emily kissed her forehead while James adjusted her nightlight. Downstairs in their own bedroom, Emily sat on the edge of the bed, pulling off her nursing shoes. James watched her, still amazed by how naturally she moved through their life together, how seamlessly she'd woven him into the fabric of their family. "How was work?" he asked. "Busy. Mrs. Rodriguez had her baby. 8 pounds, healthy boy. The Johnsons finally got to take their premature daughter home." She smiled tiredly. "Good day." James had learned to love these quiet debriefs, the way Emily carried pieces of other people's joys and sorrows home with her. It was so different from his old life, where work meant profit margins and market shares, abstract numbers that never touched real human experience. "Lily asked me today why I came to the diner," James said, settling beside her on their bed. "What did you tell her?" "That I was lonely, that I was looking for something I didn't even know I needed." Emily turned to face him fully. "And did you find it?" James looked around their modest bedroom, with its mismatched furniture and photos covering every surface. Pictures of their small wedding at Rosie's diner, Lily's school plays, Emily's graduation, family trips to the local zoo and beach. He thought about his old penthouse with its expensive art and cold marble surfaces, how it had felt more like a museum than a home. "I found everything," he said. Emily smiled and kissed him softly. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe this is our life, that you chose this over your old world." "I didn't choose this over my old world," James said. "I chose my real world over the pretend one I was living." Outside, the neighborhood was quiet except for the distant sound of late-night traffic. Inside their small house on Maple Street, James Mitchell, billionaire, CEO, and most importantly, husband and father, fell asleep next to the woman who'd taught him that love wasn't something you could buy or strategize or acquire through careful planning. It was something you had to risk everything for, something that grew in ordinary moments and quiet conversations and Sunday morning pancakes shared with the people who mattered most. In his dreams that night, James stood again in that corner office with its panoramic city view. But this time, he wasn't alone. Emily and Lily were there with him, and they were all laughing about something Lily had said. When he woke up briefly in the early morning hours, Emily's hand in his and the sound of Lily singing softly to herself in the next room, James understood with perfect clarity that he'd become the richest man in the world, not because of the numbers in his bank account, but because he'd learned the difference between having everything and having everything that mattered. The fortune remained, managed now by others, while James focused on bedtime stories and homework help, and being present for every small moment that made up a life worth living. He'd discovered that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars, or stock options, or quarterly reports. It lived in the sound of Lily calling him Dad, in Emily's tired smile after a long shift, in quiet Sunday mornings when time belonged only to them, and nothing else in the world could compete with the simple perfection of being exactly where he belonged. Now, we want to know your opinion. From 0 to 10, what score does this story deserve?